Hello, my name is Sean and I'm an elder at Andover Baptist Church, which means that I'm part of a team that helps to guide and advise on certain aspects of how the church is run. This week I've called my series of devotions, Who is in Control? And as a way of explaining what I mean, I'm going to use the example of what goes on behind the scenes whenever a passenger aircraft flies. I'm going to talk about air traffic control and explain how, just like that unseen controlling presence in a flight, God is right there with us too as we go on our life journey, guiding, shaping, sometimes admonishing, but always loving us. And I will ask, who is in control of you? As a youngster, I always wanted to be a pilot. In the 1950s and early 60s, my mother worked for the airline BOAC, which was a forerunner of today's British Airways. This was in the days when air travel was really expensive and pretty unusual. As part of her job, she got to fly to fascinating places like Rhodesia, or Zimbabwe as it's now called, on a flight that took many hours and multiple hops for refuelling. I think her stories of her travels and my frequent trips past Heathrow Airport on the way to London started a love of aviation in me which I still have to this day. Unfortunately, when I became old enough to think of training to actually be a pilot, I was unable to do this because in those days wearing glasses was enough to prevent me being accepted by an airline, and so reluctantly I had to give up that idea. However, a neighbour of ours was an air traffic controller at Boscombe Down at the time, and he got me interested in that career instead. And tomorrow I'll continue this story and tell you where that interest eventually led me. Have you ever flown in an aircraft? If you have, when you were on it, did you ever wonder just what goes on behind the scenes to get you from A to B safely? And who else is involved, other than the pilots, of course, who actually fly the thing? You can look at an app on your phone which shows all the aircraft in the sky at any one time. And even now, when flight numbers are reduced due to the pandemic, there are so many planes in the sky, it is just amazing. So just how are they all kept apart safely? Let's imagine we're going on a flight from Heathrow Airport to Edinburgh. A great deal has to happen before the aircraft leaves with you on it. Oh, and before I go any further, I need to explain to anyone watching this who actually is a pilot or an air traffic control officer or involved in aviation themselves, please don't contact me to correct what I'm saying here. I am deliberately keeping this description simplified so as not to bore all of you watching this absolutely rigid. In real life, it takes years to learn this stuff, so I am paraphrasing what I'm saying for the sake of the time I have. I know I'm missing some parts, it's deliberate. Anyway, before you get on board the aircraft, a flight plan has to be created, and that flight plan shows when and where the plane's going, and how it will get there, and how high it will fly at, etc. The pilots have briefings where, amongst other things, they look at the weather along the route, details of the route they're going to take, notes about the airports they'll use, and so on. They also brief the crew for the flight on some of these things, and when everyone's ready, they all board the plane. Once in the cockpit, there are a whole host of checks the pilots then have to go through. Things like having the right amount of fuel for the flight, working out how heavy the plane is due to the number of passengers and the amount of luggage, the weight of the fuel, etc. Pilots use paper checklists for some of this so that they don't forget anything, though increasingly these days the checklists are within the computers on the plane and they run through these on a screen, one by one. When all of the preparation has been done, the pilots will make the first call to air traffic control to let them know they're ready and ask for clearance for their route. You know, in our own lives we have choices. We can choose to go our own way, make our own decisions, be masters of our own destiny as it were. But as Christians, we recognise that we are often not great at this, and that allowing God to guide us is a little like air traffic control guiding a flight. It is a much better way to live. God always knows best. He can see the bigger picture of our lives just as air traffic control can see the bigger picture of what's taking place over the whole area. And God's ways are far superior to ours. As it says in Hebrews 11 verse 1, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Faith is believing that God exists, though we can't physically see him, that he rewards those who seek him in many ways, and that we can hope in him because his promises will always be true. Faith does not require perfection, but consistent belief that God is in control, and we're to try and live in accordance to his will. A life of faith is lived in believing the promises of God to be true and clinging to them when we're uncertain. Faith does not need to see to believe that God is in control. In reality, our lives are a mixture of control, aren't they? We give some of our lives to God and we keep some back for ourselves. We all do this, even if we wish we didn't. My prayer for you today is that you will see God's hand in your life and that you will have the faith to trust him, to allow him to be in control, and maybe over time that you will surrender more and more of yourself to him as you learn how much better he is at it than you are. After this devotion, pray with God and ask him to show you his will for you today. For my song choices this week, I'm going to give you daily links to 5 songs from one of my favourite albums of all time, across all genres. It's called Bigger Than My Imagination by an artist called Michael Gungor. When I worked in London, I used to escape the daily commute partly by listening to this music over and over on the train to Waterloo, and so it has special memories for me. Today's song is the title track of the album, Bigger Than My Imagination. I hope you like it. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you can join me again tomorrow. Goodbye.